Hey everybody, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Jeff Erickson here, and I'm joined this week by Mike Dempsey. You can catch him on the Football Diehards show every night on SiriusXM Fantasy, almost every night. Many also on the fantasy on the football channel itself on the NFL Football Radio. They simulcast sometimes on the Football Diehards show. Mike Dempsey and Bob Harris always been doing this great stuff. Mike, always a pleasure having you on. How you doing?
I appreciate you having me on, Jeff. Doing fantastic. Yeah, not quite every night on Sirius, but I'm working towards it.
Yeah, exactly. I did the draft with you, that you guys do on Fridays. I love doing that activity. I'm not even sure how I did. I'm a little bitter that Jaylen Warren getting hurt in that game because we saw what Gainwell did in that one there. I had the first pick. I took Gainwell. I took Warren. Everybody wanted him, and of course, it doesn't happen the way you think it's going to happen.
Yeah, of course, I took Jamar Chase last week, so I really don't know where things stand either. Yeah. We give away a mythic Cadillac Eldorado to first place, just like they did in Glen Ross for the sales contest. So, maybe you're a new car winner, mythically, without even knowing it.
Hopefully, I'm not a third place finisher because we know what that means too.
You're fired. Yes.
Yeah, so I do that. I'm almost always on every year, once a year for that. So I love doing that, and it's a fun little activity. I like the concept a lot there. A lot of strategy for you and Bob because you have to pick every week. You know, myself and all the other visiting hosts and the listeners, we don't have that burden of like leaving something behind for later on. We can just take the best ones we want every week.
That's right. You can, but it sometimes it kind of handcuffs you because you want to go with the flavor of the week. That might be the only opportunity to play that guy. I think it's actually an interesting format. I would like to play out, like in a league type setting. But the way we do it, obviously, we only have 4 people participating in any given week, and no one can take the player that anyone else takes. I just like to do it in a way where your lineups are hidden. And you can use anybody you like. It kind of like playoff fantasy football, right? Where you set it and you don't know who everyone else has in their lineup until the games kick off. And that way, if you and I both wanted to use Jaylen Warren last week, we could have both been disappointed.
Yep. Yeah, there's that too. I like the multi-layers of strategy. This one's this one's available for all 4. I better prioritize him. This one's only available for 2. I'll see if I can let it slide. Tried to do that with Bowers, didn't quite work, but turns out that was okay. I got Kelsey instead, who was much better. So
yes, he
worked out. So it's all good. All right, lots to talk about here. Fantasy football playoffs are right around the corner. It's week 12. The Scott Fish Bowl, they're starting this week. Other leagues, it's usually week 14, 15. Do you have a favorite tip you like to tell people for getting ready for the fantasy playoffs?
I don't think there's anything necessarily groundbreaking, right? It's just a lot of the same things that we all preach. Like, I think, you want to pare down your bench and put it into better starters if you possibly can. You want to consolidate your guys. And as your trade deadline may be already come and gone in your league, but right up until that moment, depending on where you stand, you got to balance hey, I still have to win my way into the postseason. I seeding can matter if you get a bye or not, but you obviously want to be able to put the best lineup. Depth doesn't matter as much. And agreed. I always try to, as the season goes on too, Jeff, I don't know about you. I'm a handcuffer. Like, I'm not going to handcuff all my backs, but I want one of my top 2 backs. I want him locked in as long as there's a clear guy. Like, if I have Christian McCaffrey, I would have made it a priority if I didn't get him in the draft to somewhere along the line make that offer and get him, because what the volume is like. And that volume alone doesn't create McCaffrey, but it creates the opportunity for that guy to come in and maybe keep your fantasy team afloat. So I am a believer. A lot of people say, hey, no, I'd rather speculate on somebody else's running back that gets hurt. Well, what if yours gets hurt and you have someone else's backup and the starter doesn't get hurt? What good does that do you? So I'm not saying that we don't have those kind of backup running backs on our rosters. We all do, because injuries can happen anytime, including in the fantasy playoffs. But I do think it's a little bit more important just to consolidate things, and you're just trying to put your best 8 to 10, however many you start in your league, out there on a weekly basis.
Absolutely agree. And, get other people's handcuffs in the start of the season. Get your own handcuffs late in the season. There's no need for you to kind of get that depth piece. The example I've used on air this week is cut Nick Chubb. Make sure you get your handcuff instead. And there's a perfect illustration this week, Josh Jacobs. We don't know if he's going to be able to play. If you have Emmanuel Wilson, you're sleeping well because right. You can use him this week, and you can use, that's the sort of thing. Good offense, known backup, get him. We don't know who the Colts' top backup is, but I would make sure if I have Jonathan Taylor, probably go get DJ Giddens out there, or whichever back you think is the guy. But use your extra spot on that, because that's what's going to matter. Not the Tennessee backup or the getting both Tennessee running backs. I don't care about that anymore.
Or for that matter, the starter, in Arizona. Now, Trey Benson's a different story. Maybe his ceiling's higher, but if you have Bam Knight and you can move off of Bam Knight, but he's a starter. Well, okay, if you're afraid of facing Bam Knight in a fantasy playoffs, you're probably not going to win the championship anyway, So
exactly.
You're right. That Nick Chubb type guy who, during the season when there are 6 teams on a bye, 4 teams on a bye, you want any live body who can go in there and maybe fall into the end zone. That's not the kind of player that anybody can depend on, though, in the fantasy playoffs.
Exactly. No buys next week, also Thanksgiving week, so there will be someone in week 14. Which, stop doing that, NFL. Please stop doing buys that late. That's another rant for another day. And this is supposed to be a cap time talk here, so let's move on. It is week 12, though. I mean, there's a lot to talk about. We got to jump right into the quarterback discussion here because, it's been a very fluid position. We're getting news today on some quarterbacks. I want to start off, though, with Daniel Jones coming off the bye week there, going on the road to Arrowhead, facing the Chiefs. The last 2 games have been a little dicey. We've seen bad Daniel show up a little bit there, especially in terms of facing the pass rush. What do you expect in this game against the Chiefs?
I don't want to say it's going to be bad, but I wouldn't want to start Daniel Jones against Kansas City if I didn't have to. Now, I actually have to in a couple of weeks if I'm paired up with Bo Nix. And with Nix having the week off, that's kind of where I'm at. There's nothing better on my particular waiver wires in those leagues. But I don't think he's a desirable play. We know Kansas City can play defense, and I think they're getting now to the point in the season where they're going to be playing in desperation mode a little bit here. Going on the road there, it's a tough place to play in general. But look, Daniel Jones has been phenomenal this year, and all the narrative about Jonathan Taylor being the NFL's actual MVP. Well, hasn't he been in Indianapolis? Who did they add? And to help them take over. I think you can build a pretty strong case that Daniel Jones is the Colts MVP, which would make it tough for me to see Jonathan Taylor as the league MVP. Look, he's been phenomenal. He's probably going to be the offensive player of the year, but I'm not eager to play Daniel Jones against Kansas City. But the one thing you have with him is always the possibility that he might run one in. The way Taylor's been going, though, those opportunities haven't been as frequent this year.
Yeah, exactly. Early in the season, I think there were at least 4 situations the first 3 games where Jones had 1-yard touchdown runs. And we were starting to, if you had Taylor, like, oh, this is, but then again, it's kind of like a lot like Barkley last year. When you're running that well, the touchdowns come. It doesn't always have to be from the one. And that's one good thing going for them there. Yeah. I'm old enough to remember, though, that it was actually a decision between Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. And I was actually kind of wringing my hands on the Colts decision-making process there. Like, how could they give up on Richardson? Okay. I think we can see how they can give up on him now.
Yeah, pretty safe. Look, you never know because we're not there at these places. Organizationally, they wanted Anthony Richardson to do well, but I think, Jim Irsay was probably his biggest supporter. And when he passed, now it's a more analytical approach, I think, what's going on in Indianapolis. It's a little bit similar to Minnesota. You had Sam Darnold. Well, do we keep Sam Darnold? Do we trust Sam Darnold? We invested in J.J. McCarthy. They kind of felt like they had to go down that road. And, this past week notwithstanding, Sam Darnold's played like an MVP candidate this year. These decisions are not easy, but they alter the fortunes of franchises for 5 to 10 years at a time sometimes.
Yeah, and it's sliding doors. What happens if he lands in a good environment like Seattle versus a bad environment with the Jets earlier on? Shout out to Scott Angle in the chat right now. Appreciate you at the shout out, Scotty, there. He is a Seahawks fan. Life is good for him right now.
Yeah, my guy. I love Scott.
Yeah, who doesn't? He's the king. He is fantasy. Let's talk a little bit about the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson. Since coming back, I think it's 19 carries for 60 yards, a little less than 4 yards a carry. He's not running that often, not running that well. Has 1 rushing touchdown on the season. If you have Lamar in a fantasy league, what's your level of concern that he's going to be like the Lamar we know when it gets time for the fantasy playoffs?
I think you have to be concerned to some degree, right? Is he just going to be immortal? It's funny that this is on the rundown today because I was thinking about this when I saw that Lamar did not practice today, and it made me wonder. I went back and looked at the rushing totals from last week, only a handful of attempts for very little yardage. Derrick Henry seems to be a little bit rejuvenated, so they don't need that necessarily out of Lamar on a week-to-week basis. It's still in him, but you do have to wonder, after missing time, is he trying to pick his spots a little bit more? I think as you get later into the season and it becomes must-win territory, I think that's the biggest thing you have going for you if you're a Lamar Jackson manager, because the Ravens need to continue to win, keep their foot on the accelerator. They can't afford, they've dug themselves a little bit of a hole, and they're trying to climb out of it right now. But look, I've got him in a league. I have 12 leagues where I've got to set lineups, and I only have him in one, and it's been okay, and I'm not going to not roll him out there because we know the upside is so great, but that's the trap that you can fall into, and it's more a lesson about investing in those high quarterbacks. You can do that if you're hitting the right guy. Like if you got Josh Allen, fine. Some of these other guys that were up in that range, you would have been better off waiting until the 12th, 13th round and taking a Matt Stafford this year.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of good weight on QBs. Justin Herbert was late.
Drake May.
Drake May was late. Yeah, and I even said I want to get some Drake May in my life, and I only had him in like one league out of 20. It's like, what am I doing? I said I wanted to get him, and then I didn't follow through with that. But there were plenty. Even Caleb Williams has had some good moments this year too. So there's been plenty. And we did talk about the QB pool and how deep it was this year. That was one thing. Like I have 0 Bo Nix this year, and there's been some games I've missed out on, but I've avoided the swings, the roller coaster that comes with Bo Nix. That was one. I hated that cross section between ability and price. It's like the 6th or 7th QB taken. I just thought you could get the 12th and get the same value. So that was at least lucky to avoid. But this is not about what I did and didn't do at the draft table. Let's move on. Jared Goff, worst game of the year against those Eagles on Sunday night. Least accurate, 14 of 37. Granted, it's the Eagles, it's the elements. Does he bounce back this week? And what's your level of concern with Goff? This team, the way they're structured this year.
I have to look at that game as an aberration, right? Goff usually, when he's got any kind of time, now he didn't have a whole lot, but when he's got any kind of time, usually he will pick you apart. The accuracy is never the issue. And I watched that game, and even it got in his head. It reached a point, I feel like, where it didn't matter if the pressure was there or not. He didn't trust himself to throw the ball from point A to point B. And you could see he was kind of trying to guide it, name it in there. It was absolutely horrendous. I'm hoping with a big step down in the level of competition this week that he's able to kind of get back on track. I've got him in a startup dynasty. I waited on quarterback. I took Goff, but I'm probably going to sit him for Purdy this week against Carolina. And that's, you talk about quarterbacks again. Brock Purdy's a guy that I am really excited about for the fantasy playoffs because the San Francisco defense has fallen apart due to injury this year. And that's ideal, right? It'll give up a bunch of points, so we have to keep pace throughout. Detroit's not quite in that situation, but Goff, I still think, is a steady guy. If you had to roll him out there this week, and I probably will start him in at least one league this week. I'm hoping for the bounce back. But if you see something akin to what you saw last week, then it's a mental issue. It's not, the offense. It's not anything defenses are doing to him because he just looked out of sorts.
Yeah, I will say losing Frank Ragnow in June like they did was a linchpin moment. Teams that can generate good interior pressure can affect the Detroit Lions. You saw that with the Vikings the week they beat them in Ford Field. Saw that early in the season with the Packers, and we saw it against the Eagles. And I think that's definitely an issue there for them. But I'm with you. I see the eye to eye on this one. I have Purdy at 7. I have Goff at 12. I prefer Purdy. I could start either one of them if need be. There's others I'd try to stay away from there. One that I'm not sure what to do with here is Bryce Young. The top 4 passing yard games this year, Mike, have been Russell Wilson in week 2 against the Cowboys, the Flacco game against the Steelers, and last week 2, Jacoby Brissett and Bryce Young.
Right.
Yeah, that's a slip. What the heck is going on here? How are those the top 4 passing games of the year?
I guess matchups, it works that way sometimes. And again, we're talking about in Brissett's case going up against San Francisco. And when you're trailing against a team that has a bad defense, we saw what the result was, an NFL record for completions. But look, I think Bryce Young is potentially pretty live here. And again, without going crazy. I don't think he's an every week start, but I think you can play the matchups with him. And this is it. San Francisco is what we're talking about. The only concern is, do we get a clean injury report on Friday? I don't have any Bryce Young, not in my head-to-head league. So I don't have this option, but that's going to be the deciding point. Do you roll with somebody on Sunday that maybe you don't like as much, or their matchup is a little bit tougher, or do you wait for Monday? I think that, if he is questionable this week, that reporting on Sunday morning that you get Bryce Young questionable but likely to play, you're really going to have to lean into that because I would love to get him on the field or in my lineup this week.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with him either. I've got him in some super flex leagues where, click the button, no problem. But
of course.
And it's funny, 2 of those 4 big games were on the road. 2 of those, the only real pass funnel was the Cowboys in week 2. Atlanta's okay defensively against the pass, but they just weren't that game. Tetairoa and McMillan just went off against them, and they had like Caden Ellis covering him on that game, that touchdown in the fourth quarter. Like, what's a linebacker doing one-on-one on Tetairoa and McMillan? That's not even fair. He was open
making us happy.
Yeah, he was open 3 different ways. It was so funny watching like the film on that play there. He had him in a total spin cycle there. Really fun. News out of Cincinnati: Joe Burrow practicing with the ones, leaving open the possibility of him returning this week, not even next week in Thanksgiving. Joe Flacco not practicing at all. How crazy is this?
Oh, well, that would be crazy if he gets back. And that might be the best hope you have as a manager. And not that Joe Flacco hasn't kept these guys afloat, but I think we'd all like to see Joe Burrow throwing it to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I was concerned that if they lose to New England, which they likely will, Burrow or not, the way New England's playing, that, that would put him, I think, at 3-8. And maybe he's not ready for Thanksgiving. And then if you lose that one to Baltimore and you're 3-9, does the organization take the decision out of his hands? And it got me thinking, I don't know if you recall this era of the 80s. I'm not trying to date you, but in the NBA, when Michael Jordan in his second season missed most of the year, he was injured and the Bulls wanted to shut him down. He's like, no, I'm not setting that precedent. And he came back.
I do remember that.
Right. He dragged the team to the postseason. He had one of the most remarkable 3-game series against the Boston Celtics. Yeah. Right. He put up the 63, and I think he had a 49-point game in there as well. But it was more like that kind of stamped him as a competitor. I do think Burrow is that type of guy. So I do hope that he gets the opportunity, and I hope they can protect him, man. And that's the thing with Joe Burrow, man. And some of these guys, just whether it's injury prone or lack of protection or just dumb luck, whatever the case may be, that, we don't want to see Joe Burrow robbed of the prime of his career. And one of his seasons has been for the most part. But if you've got him, if you can pick him up and, you'd like to see him get a game or 2 under his belt, what a great weapon that could be added to your fantasy lineup for the fantasy playoffs.
Absolutely. This week, he won't have Jamar Chase because the law firm of Jackie Childs and Company couldn't find the second spitter. So Chase's suspension is being upheld. He will sit out this game against the Pats, which means T. Higgins is going to get all that coverage from Christian Gonzalez. It's not going to be a fully formed Bengals lineup, and I don't even know what that is anymore as a self-hating Bengals fan. So tough look there, but I think it's a fascinating discussion. We're going to talk running backs coming up next, but first, got a quick note from our friends at Dabble. Dabble isn't just another DFS app. It's the ultimate social platform where you can connect with other fantasy sports lovers. Dabble lets you win big. You can win up to 5,000 times your money this football season. Starting with Dabble is easy. New users get $25 free when signing up. No deposit necessary. Check out the link in the episode description below to download Dabble now. Thank you to Dabble for sponsoring the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Jeff Erickson here with Mike Dempsey. Mike, you can catch on SiriusXM Fantasy. Catch him on the Football Guys podcast. You do that 10-minute news podcast with Bob Harris. And lots of news for you to go over this week, as always, Mike.
Always, yeah. We do 10. I do it with Bob. It comes out. The ones I do come out Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Bob handles the one because I work with the Jaguars on game day, so he handles the one for Mondays. But yeah, love doing that. I just love talking fantasy football, man. So put me in front of a microphone, and you will have a hard time getting me to shut up sometimes.
You and me both. We have the best job in the world. Beats working in the salt mills. That's for sure.
It beats working. Period.
Yeah, period. Yes, we don't have real jobs, and I like that. Let's talk running backs and let's talk Bijan Robinson. when we last saw Kirk Cousins at the helm, he also didn't have Drake London for that game. It's supposed to be a cake matchup against Bijan Robinson against that Miami Dolphins run defense. Little do we know that A, the Dolphins were starting to play a little harder, and B, how awful Kirk Cousins really truly could be. And it was a nightmare. They stacked the box. Are we going to see a reprise of that this week? Or is Bijan are they going to figure it out and free him up a little bit better?
Well, I mean, again, I think that what you said, the Drake London absence, that's one of the keys here, right? Because even if you don't have Penix and, Cousins can't drive it down the field, who do you have to respect in that passing game? But on the other hand, look, one game we often draw final conclusions on, right? Oh, this guy's lost it, or this guy is going to break out, or whatever. And it's not always that case. Kirk Cousins played enough football in the National Football League that I've got my fingers crossed that he can get two guys to stay afloat. And those two guys are Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts, because I do think Cousins will tend to lean on the shorter stuff. He doesn't have the arm to drive the ball down the field at this stage of his career. He never had a big arm, but, could adequately deliver most of the throws that you needed. So I do think there will be somewhat of a passing funnel, and I think that's where Bijan Robinson might get his value here, because, look, if I'm a defensive coordinator, I'm going to stack the box against them all day. Yep. And it's not just that. He's got the threat of Tyler Algier. I mean, Algier's getting on the field, and Jeff, as you well know, early in games and poaching touchdowns. It's not like Bijan Robinson's like, I had 7 carries on this drive, and I just ripped off the 35-yarder. I need a blow. No, he's getting the ball down there. They'll throw a big pass to Drake London, and they'll put Algier in. I get it. They're trying to win football games, not our fantasy games, but it's frustrating nevertheless. But I do think it does make Algier a reasonable, dart toss of a flex on any given week, particularly in standard leagues. There are weeks he's going to outscore Robinson in standard leagues when he gets those opportunities. But, look, bottom line is we can hem and haw. How many people are going to have a running back on their roster that they're going to feel comfortable playing over Bijan Robinson if you've got 2 running backs in a flex? So suck it up. You're going to get what you get, and let's hope that Kirk Cousins, drank a little out of the fountain of youth this week.
Yeah, I think, the only actionable thing is to see what sort of value you could get in a trade for the rest of the season, because that would be it. I mean, the Saints do know how to stack the box. That's what they did against Rico Dowdle 2 weeks ago before their bye. They said, Rico Dowdle, you're not going to beat us. After that first drive, they just focused on that the rest of the game. And that's the thing. That's crazy thing about Bryce Young's game last week is how pitiful he was against the Saints the week before. It just shows that this game, you just never know with some of these teams there. So it's really kind of wild to see that. Let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about the New England Patriots. Rhamondre Stevenson was back on the practice field today. TreVeyon Henderson, he is the genie out of the bottle, but is he really? What do we see? This sweet matchup against the Bengals. Is he going to go back to a secondary role, or is this a situation there where he's going to roll?
I don't think it'll be a secondary role, but I don't think it will be the volume that he's gotten in the last couple of weeks either. I do look, Mike Vrabel, again, he's trying to win football games, and he knows one way to do that is to keep his guys healthy and distribute the workload a little bit. And Rhamondre played well this year. Let's be honest, right? So I get it. And early on, TreVeyon Henderson, we saw a few glimpses that were like, well, where's the explosiveness? Where are the big plays, even on the few opportunities he had? But now, when he got a chance to get that kind of volume and that consistency and not have to look over his shoulder, he's shown you what he's capable of doing. But you got to wonder, like the 2 he scored from inside the 10 running, I think on Thursday night, I think both of them came from inside the 10. One of them might have been outside. Will Rhamondre be the one getting those carries? So right. I'm going to guess, like Mike Vrabel's got eyes, right? I mean, we all saw it. But, instead of like a 75-25 split with Jennings, maybe a 55-45, a 60-40, maybe on the high end. But I would hope that TreVeyon Henderson would be the lead guy. And if I had them both on my roster and I could only play one and it were a PPR league, I would take the chance on Henderson and Vrabel being sane.
Yeah, I think you start Henderson if you have him. I think it's even a case there where you could start both just because the Bengals are capable of giving it up. If you're in a bye week situation there, maybe you've got Achane on bye. I'm looking at the bye week teams like RJ Harvey's not going to kill you being on bye. Certainly the Washington running backs aren't going to kill you. Vidal being hurt and on bye is a double whammy there, but it's really trying to replace Achane this week is the real key here this week. The New York Jets, they go to Baltimore. They're a big underdog, 13.5 point underdog right now as it stands. Breece Hall is the one good thing that grows in this desert. What can we get out of him this week?
A lot of attention paid by the defense.
Yeah.
I don't have a good feeling about it. I mean, Breece is that type of runner that is capable of breaking a long one, but I do think that's kind of where you're at with Breece Hall. He needs to break a long one to really be more than a flex option for you, or at least a flex producer. He may be your RB2 and you don't have better options. And, but to get more than flex level production, I think he's got to break at least a long run, likely to the end zone, or, as he did a couple of weeks ago with Fields, will dump off pass and take that to the house. But I mean, look, you don't have Garrett Wilson, and I know they want to evaluate some of these other pass catchers with Tyrod, who's they hope is going to throw a more consistent ball than Justin Fields, which shouldn't be hard, but I don't know, man. You tell me who's going to see more of a stacked box this week than Breece Hall will. So I'm hoping that some of the lapses we saw early in the season with Baltimore show up. All it takes is one or two big plays. You're probably not getting away from starting Breece Hall, but I bet there are some teams out there that do have a backfield on their fantasy roster that they could probably get away with it and justify it.
Last 4 weeks, Ravens are the fourth toughest defense again for fantasy points in PPR leagues against running backs. Clearly, Roquan Smith is back and playing like Roquan Smith again. It's a different defense than we saw earlier.
Totally.
Giving Kyle Hamilton the ability to rove has also been something that's huge for this Ravens team. So, unfortunately, this is really a bad matchup, and I have my decent amount of exposure to Breece Hall, and I'm not feeling too good about it. That's for sure. Let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about the Houston Texans going up against the Bills on Thursday night. When I saw the Bills, they were getting carved up yet again by another running back, two running backs, actually. Even Rachaad White had a good game, but it got overshadowed because Sean Tucker was amazing in this game. Can Woody Marks exploit this good matchup, or is this just such a bad offensive line that they can't take advantage of it?
No, I think he can, actually, because, it is a matchup that you can run against Buffalo, but also I'm anticipating Buffalo winning this football game, which means they're probably going to play ahead for a good portion of the second half. Now, Houston has a great defense. They can keep it relatively close, but, in the second half, I could see Woody Marks getting 4, 5, 6 targets in the passing game. And we all know that the value of a target is worth much more in fantasy than the value of a carry. So, and he's got speed as well. I think, Woody Marks, I put it this way, I'd play Woody Marks over Breece Hall this week, given the option. And I'd feel very comfortable about that. I wouldn't bat an eye. So, yeah, I would expect, particularly in PPR leagues, that Woody Marks will give you a reasonable return.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Nick Chubb got such a small percentage of the snap share. Even after the coaches said, we didn't mean to do that way 2 weeks ago, and then they did it again. That's
right.
your sign that they really do mean to do
it. The funny thing is, 2 weeks ago, he averaged like 9 yards a carry. Nick Chubb did on those handful of carries, but they know where the future is. And look, if they are able to pull the upset, great for them. They're one of the teams that's kind of lurking just outside the playoff picture, but they got to be a little bit concerned here with CJ Stroud. Just got in a limited practice yesterday, 2 full weeks without being able to get out there and even begin the process of getting through the concussion protocol. So we'll see. That's a team that, like many, have faced a lot of key injuries, but I do think Woody Marks is viable this week.
Yeah, very scary. Reminder that no concussion is the same. They're all different, and it's really hard. You don't really have that sort of timetable when it happens. I mentioned Sean Tucker and Rachaad White. What does Sean Tucker do for a reprise? Bucky Irving might come back this week, might not. They played the Sunday night game against the Rams. Much tougher matchup here. What do you do with Sean Tucker if you have him?
I mean, look, if it's a choice between Sean Tucker and Rachaad White, you play Sean Tucker, I think, at this point, because Rachaad White is just pretty pedestrian, right? But what if you get a questionable tag on Bucky Irving,
right?
and then what?
Sunday night.
It's Sunday night football, right? How many pivots do you have at that point? Probably not that many, because McCaffrey and Dowdle are already in somebody's lineup on Monday Night Football. So yeah, there's not a whole lot of opportunity to go. Maybe Blake Corum's out there, I don't know, but or you just stick with Sean Tucker, because even if Bucky Irving does come back, I don't think he's going to be a 20-touch guy necessarily immediately, although he has gotten in a little bit of practice work. I don't like the matchup here. I think either way, like if you've got an injury or two, or you have Achane, as you mentioned, there's not that many key running backs down this week. I think the problem is people go to the waiver wire, and when they pick up something new, they want to use it immediately. Well, why did I get this guy? Well, sometimes the value is in just taking that player out of the pool and not letting somebody else use that player against you. So I've got to see what the injury report holds for Bucky Irving before I get excited about Sean Tucker on Sunday Night Football this week.
Yeah, and before I get excited about Bucky Irving, I want to see if he's a full practice these like Thursday,
Absolutely.
Friday, or anything. Because, we talked about this on Friday when I did your draft. We had a question about Ricky Pearsall, and turns out Ricky Pearsall was out there running wind sprints for the most part in his first game back. That's one of the things that can happen. Players get eased into games, so it can be pretty tricky. This podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Trophy Smack. We love Trophy Smack. They have great headquarters out here in Orange, just south of me in Orange County. Hosted Scott Fishbowl for a couple of years there. You dominated your fantasy football league all season long. Now it's time to show off. Trophy Smack turns your league domination into hardware built to flex. From championship belts, trophies, rings, and chains, they've got everything a true champion needs to make victories unforgettable. And don't forget about shaming that league loser. They've got items like high visibility loser vests, embarrassing singlets, and humiliating license plate frames. Trophy Smack fuels the glory and punishment of every league needs to keep the season unforgettable. Trash talk fades, but hardware lasts forever. You earn this moment, claim it. Visit TrophySmack.com to lock in your hardware and take 10% off with code ROTOSMACK10. That's TrophySmack.com, code ROTOSMACK10. You can thank us later. Big thanks to Trophy Smack for their sponsorship of this podcast. Mike, you play in a ton of leagues. Do you have any special rewards or punishments for any of your home leagues? Any longstanding traditions?
No, not really. I run a few leagues. I don't have a home league per se. Okay. When I first started playing in the 90s, I played with a buddy who got me into a 16-team league, and we won the league in the first year. We kind of co-managed it, and I was hooked. So I never really had my own home league. Honestly, most of the leagues I'm in are spread out across the country, through the internet, a lot of dynasty leagues. But I do run 3 leagues through my local show in Jacksonville, where we get listeners and members of the local media to go head-to-head. Some former Jaguar players will play in there as well, but nothing too exotic. One thing I do like, though, because I like playing in deeper leagues. I like 14 and 16-team leagues because I feel like, even in a 12-team league, everybody can come out feeling great about your draft. I don't think that should be the case. I feel like there should be a little bit of stress involved in it, right? I agree. So what I like to do is in those leagues, I may lean more heavily on flex positions. Don't require you to start 3 wide receivers or 2 running backs necessarily, but give you the option to start 2 or 3 running backs. But also I like incorporating return yardage, and it's a subtle little thing, but it increases the player pool. You guys like Rashid Shaheed and Marvin Mims, players like that who have a passing game role, but they also excel. Chimere DK of the Titans. Yes. I've got him in a league like that. So and, before he got hurt this past week, he was phenomenal. He was on like a 3-week heater where he was scoring in the 20s, and a lot of it had to do with his kickoff return yardage. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, just looking for different ways. And I think people should always familiarize themselves with their scoring system as much as possible. There are ways to kind of game the system at times. And so that's a fun one for me that I like to use.
Yeah, I like that too. I'm in a 16-teamer with a bunch of baseball scouts. It's a lot of fun. I'm in the RotoWire Stake League is a 14-teamer. We have a stake dinner side bet. It's total points based. We go all the way through week 18. Top 4 eat for free. 5th place pays for himself. 6th and 7th pay for themselves and one other. The dreaded double buyer pays for himself and 2 others. We go to this great steakhouse called Taylor's in LA. And we've been doing this for 20 years, and it's like appetizers, drinks, desserts. You can only order for yourself. There's no doggy bags. There's none of that. You got to consume it there. No $1,000 bottles of wine or anything stupid like that either. We're not pro football players, but at the same time, it's a way we get to have a dinner together in the off season. All the better. Right. It's great. I love doing that there.
I don't know 15 people that would want to spend that much FaceTime with me, to be honest with you. But I love the idea. It sounds like a really cool concept though.
Yeah, it's super fun. Let's talk wide receivers. And there are so many to talk about this week. I tried to pare down the list as best I can. You're my Jacksonville guy though. I got to start here. Brian Thomas, I know you're sick. It's ad nauseum talking about it, but I want to ask you about Brian Thomas Jr. for dynasty leagues. I mean, the ship has sailed for those of you, if you took Thomas over Puka or you took Thomas over Jonathan Taylor for this year, but for dynasty leagues, what are we doing? How are we valuing him?
Well, I mean, it's simple reality is if you've got him, he's probably a hold because you're not going to get anything close to what his potential value is. I have him in one dynasty. I play in 5 dynasties. I have him in one, and it would take a lot to, I would have to get a return that is indicative of more than what he has shown this year, but I'm a little bit concerned about it. But here's the thing. Look, he's locked in Jacksonville for the foreseeable future. And I think they'd love to bring Jakobi Meyers back. And if they do that, they've got a guy who can handle the stuff that Brian Thomas Jr., frankly, has not been good at this year, that intermediate stuff over the middle, in between the hashes. Let him play as more of an outside the hash wide receiver and take more deep shots to him. He's had an issue with drops this year, and he's had, at times, it looked like he's shying away from contact. Now, not every receiver loves getting blasted when they go over the middle, but every once in a while you got to do it. And now with the Jags getting Jakobi Meyers back in the trade, hopefully getting Brenton Strange back, hopefully they have 2 targets that can kind of take that pressure off in that area of the field. Don't know if Brian Thomas is going to play. I spoke with somebody in the organization today. They are fairly confident that Brenton Strange will return. Don't know. They don't have that much confidence in Brian Thomas Jr. I'm not ruling it out at this point with what's been described as a low-grade high ankle sprain. But if you're on the other side of it, if you don't have Brian Thomas, you should be taking the temperature of the Brian Thomas manager. And if you could, I would give you a second-round pick in Dynasty easily for Brian Thomas because his ceiling is that of a first rounder plus. And, even in the first round, we think every year, this guy, I love this guy. I love that guy. I love the other guy. They're not all going to hit. Right? And certainly your second rounders are not going to hit. The drop off, the curve of the drop off in dynasty rookie drafts. Look, we all love having the capital and we love having the picks, but it's pretty steep. By the time you get to the third round, I mean, you might get 2 guys that really can help in the first year or 2. And you're going to probably get a half dozen guys that are going to get cut to the waiver wire left on a taxi squad. So I think, it's the classic. If you got him, you're probably holding unless you get an offer that'll blow you away. And why would you blow someone away who has Brian Thomas Jr. with that kind of offer? So if you can get something like a second round rookie pick or less and acquire Brian Thomas, I would do that. I'd roll the dice on that all day. But if I'm owning him or managing him right now, I'd probably want a second plus. I don't think it's realistic to think you can get a first rounder for him. So, it's again, a guy who got us excited and has disappointed doesn't mean he can't bounce back, or doesn't mean that first season can't be the best he's ever going to put up too. So, I think it's to each their own how they evaluate him, but that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. The tough part is those over the middle routes are valuable. I mean, those are the crossers that you can break for big plays. It's just volume. I mean, it's all that there. We're just talking about the concept you're talking about, though, the drop off in dynasty drafts, and it's at the end of the first round. I mean, ask anybody who has Caleb Johnson how they feel about that right about now. There were some right answers. It was tough to get to that right answer. Maybe you got Jackson Dart.
You might have taken Scattaboo in the second round, which I did in a couple of leagues, right? Or Bajal Tootin in the second round, and you feel good about those guys. So it's like anything else.
Exactly.
If we could know the outcome, there are probably plenty of guys that are worth a first or second round pick in dynasty rookie drafts. It's that we just don't know who they are necessarily going into it.
Yeah. If the teams don't, how should we know any better?
Right. Exactly.
And, there's plenty of misses by NFL teams. Ask anybody who took, who passed on Justin Jefferson for, who's the kid on Philly that went right before him?
Nelson Aguilar.
No, more recent. He's out of the game. He was on the Chargers last year. Anyways, it's gonna eat at me, and
you're right. It wasn't Aguilar. All right, we'll have to dig that up.
At any rate, if they can mess up that badly, so can we. That's the thrust I was going for here. And anyways, I want to eat up your time here on that name search. Odunze.
I know it now. I have to know it now.
Who is it?
Sorry.
Tell me.
I don't know. I'm going to find out though. Go ahead.
Got to know it now. Yes. Yeah. And while we're doing it, I'll bring up the concept. DJ Moore and Odunze every week are a challenge for me. Both have had zeros in the last couple of weeks. Both have had big games in the last couple of weeks. It's one of those vexing things is trying to figure out this Bears passing game to try to figure out exactly who's going to be able to contribute in any given week. Did we find our answer, by the way?
Let's see. Jalen Reagor.
Yes. Thank you. Now
Right
I can stop beating myself up.
See, I hate looking at that draft because Jacksonville took CJ Henderson when they could have had CD Lamb. And then they took Caleb Chase on, who finally this year is having a year when they could have had Justin Jefferson. So they could have had both CD Lamb and Justin Jefferson since 2020 on the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I'm a little traumatized looking back.
Oh yeah.
To be honest with you, Jeff.
For sure. Well, hey, don't look at it, but look at any Bengals draft in recent memory. John Ross in the first round, one of my favorite hits. He was hurt going into the draft. You knew he was. Yeah. Okay. I'm stopping ranting. No more Bengals rants. Back to Bears. Do you have a formula for when Rome Odunze is going to go off and when it's going to be DJ? I don't either.
I don't.
I think he's going to eventually get there to be the main guy, but it's not a consistent thing yet.
Look, I thought he was arriving there earlier this season, and then you see a game where he doesn't have a catch at all, and like, how can that be? I don't. It's frustrating having that kind of player, and I think the key is you can't have too many of that kind of player, because in the weeks where they both disappoint you, good luck. You're going to have a McCaffrey monster game to make up for it. So I guess it worked out this way. Outside of best ball, I don't have a single Chicago wide receiver or tight end on my rosters this year. I've got a little bit of DeAndre Swift, got some Kyle Monangai in Dynasty. So I haven't had that issue to deal with, but we get these lineup questions all the time on Football Diehards, and it's very tough. Odunze, okay, I know what the upside is. And a lot of times that's what it comes down to. Do you want Keenan Allen, who's going to get you 10 or 11 in a lot of weeks, or do you want Odunze, who's going to get you 20 or 0 or 3 or what,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So it really depends on what you need. Sometimes if you're an underdog, I don't mind having a guy like that at the end of my lineup because hopefully he hits the high end.
Yep. And Luther Burton is ascendant. So is Colston Loveland. Both of those guys are starting to play more, get targeted more. It's making good for the Bears, makes it tougher for us, unfortunately. And
no doubt.
Again, they don't care about my fantasy lineup.
At least Olamide Zaccheaus has fallen far enough down the depth chart that he doesn't seem to be a factor now.
Yeah, that drop fest against the Giants was enough to do that there. Just a horrible game for him on that one there. Only 10 snaps last week against the Vikes. George Pickens against this Eagles revamped defense. Pickens is awesome. Dak has been awesome. CD's awesome. Auto starts, but man, I hate this matchup against the Eagles. Eagles are nasty.
Yeah, I feel like, when it gets to these division games as well, Philadelphia is going to want to have a little something for them. Remember, Jalen Carter got thrown out when he spit on Dak, so he hasn't had a chance to play against him this year. Mm-hmm. His presence is going to make it tough for Javonte Williams to go. And, I think Dallas will end up being a little bit one-dimensional here, and I think the pressure will get to Dak at times. Now, Dak will throw it enough, and he'll probably put up decent enough numbers for himself, but will that go through Pickens? Will that go through CeeDee Lamb? I mean, like you said, you're probably playing those guys regardless, but you just have to readjust your expectations a little bit. It's not like you can't beat Philadelphia. I mean, every player is beatable. We saw Christian Gonzalez get beat by Adonai Mitchell a few times last week. He just couldn't catch the football when it got delivered. So, I mean, it's possible that Pickens has a good game. I wouldn't expect anything close to what we saw on Monday night, which, by the way, thank you, George Pickens. Needed that. Going up against Quinnen Williams pretty much head-to-head and playing a lot of IDP leagues. I know you're playing a few yourself as well. So, what do you do when you got a guy like that who's capable of the numbers, and he is a starter, and it's a good general all-around offense, and the Dallas defense, although I think they're kind of rebuilt on the fly here and they're better, have been generous this year. And you hope you get into one of those situations where Philly's going to put up 28 or more. So Dallas feels the need to keep pace, and just on sheer volume alone, Pickens can drag you to a decent week.
Yeah, for sure. And then you just hope at the volume, you just hope it doesn't become like the Denver game, for instance, there, where it just falls so far out of control that's why it happens there. How about the other side of that matchup there? It's been a study in frustration watching the Eagles offense, and now they don't have Lane Thomas. They don't have they may not have this Cam Jurgens at center. The offensive coordinator doesn't call any design runs for Jalen Hurts. It's just a mess of an offense right now.
It is. And, even when they target AJ Brown, he doesn't always run out his routes. It's very weird what's going on. I think it's easy to get away from playing AJ Brown at this point in time. And you think, okay, well, then I'll play DeVonta Smith. And then he catches one ball for 8 yards, which is what he did last week. So Goddard has been the most consistent guy. He didn't have a great game last week, but you got to live with some variance too. Like I would say Goddard through 11 weeks has probably had 4 games in the single digits, and the rest of them have been pretty useful for you in PPR leagues. So I think he is the one reliable piece in the passing game. And, I'm hoping that we get maybe not a 2024 version of Saquon, but a little bit of a renaissance here down the stretch. I mean, you're not going to get away from playing Saquon Barkley, but week to week basis, I think you could probably play Hurts against almost anybody, but you're right. No design runs for him there. We're starting to see the tush push get slowed down on occasion a little bit more, but I think with Philly, you're just hoping, if you're playing Hurts, he gets a first down inside the 3 at some point, because he's going to get multiple opportunities to run on the score. And if he runs in 2, it's as good as throwing 3 in most leagues. So he doesn't need, from his standpoint, to throw. And I think he's serious, Jeff, when he kind of takes his ego out of it. I don't think he does care if they win 10-7. And I get AJ Brown's point that this won't be good enough in the postseason, but that doesn't mean that's how you're going to play necessarily in the postseason.
Right.
Win these games now by any score necessary. And I think Hurts is okay with that, which, is not ideal for fantasy, obviously. No,
it isn't. But it is, the pieces are there. It couldn't still work. I mean, last year, remember they go into the bye after getting thumped by Tampa. They come out of the bye. They beat Cleveland only because they had like a blocked kick touchdown. You got booed off the field for their offense there. They still won that game, but the vibes were really bad then, and then they figured it out. They can still figure it out. So
they can. They can, but they're winning, so there's no great sense of panic and feel the need to change anything right now either.
Exactly right. One more wide receiver situation, and that's Green Bay. I want to talk about Christian Watson. Really nice cash to win that game against the Giants. 2 touchdowns. He's looking healthy finally for the first time in a long time. Romeo Doubs look like he's wearing oven mitts at times. Unfortunately, he did what are these? What are these things in my hands? Oh, they are my hands. He really struggled in that game. But still, is there a Green Bay pass catcher that we can rely on from week to week?
Yes, Tucker Kraft. Oh, wait. Unfortunately. Sorry, Tucker. Get well soon. He was the one. Look, this, again, comes down to, like, if you had them both on a roster, and why would you? But if you did, you can't play any of the other ones, Dontavian Wicks or Matthew Golden or any of those guys. I don't think Musgrave's appealing either, because in part, Jordan Love is so inconsistent at times. Great, and then miserable at other times. But I mean, I think the way I'd look at it is like, all right, if I'm the heavy favorite here and I just want to get 8 to 10 points, maybe I go with Doubs. And if I need upside, obviously Christian Watson's the upside guy. He's also a guy who's capable of catching 2 passes for 20 yards, but they do take shots, multiple shots down the field to him generally. I love his talent. I think he's one of the most physically gifted players at his position in the National Football League. So I'm always intrigued by him. I've got him on one of my key dynasty teams, and I had him on more, and I used him as a chip last year to go all in a couple of leagues, and it worked out. But if I could only have one, I'd take Christian Watson. He's the more explosive player. It takes less. He can do more on one target than Doubs typically can do. He did have the 3 touchdown game early, Doubs, but for the most part, he's really not a touchdown scorer, not much of a red zone threat. So give me Watson if I had to choose.
Yeah, that 3 touchdown game was the 40-40 tie against the Cowboys. That's right. That was fun. But unfortunately, those were perfect conditions. And unfortunately, the Packers rarely play in perfect conditions, as we've seen a lot there. We're going to move on to tight ends, but first we got a quick note from our last sponsor. That is not our last sponsor, but a third sponsor for this podcast, Chalkboard. Cash in on your NFL picks this season with Chalkboard. Simply choose more or less on your favorite player stats to win up to 5,000 times your money. For a limited time only, new players receive a free pick and 100% deposit match. See why over 1 million fans have already locked in with Chalkboard to turn their sports knowledge into cold hard cash. Whether you're locking in the perfect slip with alternate lines, using the cash out feature to take your money and run, or hammering the daily promos, today is your chance to win up to $40,000 on a single entry. Stop sitting on the sidelines. Get into the game with Chalkboard Fantasy Sports. It's now available in 30 plus states. Download Chalkboard today and use promo code ROTONFL. That's ROTONFL to claim your free pick and 100% deposit match now. I'm here with Mike Dempsey. He is with the Football Diehards on SiriusXM Fantasy, also a Football Guys podcast. You can make sure just check out all of his great work. Just on we get to talk football for a living. It's awesome. It's just awesome that we get to do that. Tight ends, not a whole lot to talk about this week. Juwan Johnson, though, had him on the show actually last week during his bye week. Really nice guy. Really fun to talk with him. Talked about his transitioning from wide receiver to tight end, different quarterbacks. He looks like he kind of connects well with Tyler Shuck. I think he might actually be a decent volume play as opposed to a touchdown or nothing guy.
Yeah, I hope so. And rookie quarterbacks, even ones who are 26 years old, like Tyler Shuck, have a tendency to lean on their close proximity targets, the big guy that's right in front of their face. So it's not surprising that he's leaning on him there. I've been pleasantly surprised by Tyler Shuck. I was very worried that this is the guy they spent the 40th pick in the draft on, and Spencer Rattler was able to hold him off for most of the year. And like I said, he's 26 years old. He's older than Trevor Lawrence. Like, the clock is ticking on Tyler Shuck as to whether or not you're going to evaluate him and whether or not you need to dip back into the quarterback pool next year. But, Johnson's one of these guys is never just going to be sexy. I've seen him on and off waiver wires, honestly, all season long in some of the leagues I'm in. And, there have been some ebbs and flows. But, yeah, I think Shuck, now Rashid Shaheed's out of the mix there. It's a two-man passing game. They're not throwing it to Kamara. So It's Olave and it's Johnson. And I could play him. He's not an elite tight end. You're not going to play him over the George Kittles of the world. But if that were my weak spot in my lineup, I'd feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what Kellen Moore's ginned up over the bye week too. See what happens there to kind of unlock Kamara a little bit better than that was earlier in the season. Who knows? Chris Olave, I've been encouraged by him being able to stay healthy and look productive too. So there's some kernels of good things happening out of New Orleans. They're actually favored against the Falcons this week. Didn't think we'd see that coming into this year, but that's how bad Kirk Cousins has looked.
Right, and no Michael Penix for Kirk Cousins in there, and no Drake London is a big factor as well. So yeah, I'm not shocked. I mean, and they played really well against Carolina 2 weeks ago, so I think they probably earned it.
Indeed. I didn't throw this on the outline I sent you, but one other guy I wanted to bring up at tight end is Hunter Henry. I think he's like the Tyler Algier of tight ends. He's always kind of useful for a little bit of a baseline. You can use him in those bye weeks. And of course, he gets the choice matchup against the Bengals this week.
Oh, man. Are you kidding me? We had a call about Hunter Henry last night, and it was, several people in the situation, ironically enough, where they had Dalton Kincaid and Rhamondre Gadsden. And Gadsden's on a bye, and Kincaid is not going to play, as we found out today. And so they're like, should I drop him for this tight end or that tight end? And I said, really, it kind of depends on what position you're in. Sometimes it's okay to play without that guy in your lineup if it's going to cost you a player. And the guy goes, and also there's Hunter Henry. I'm like, get him right now, man. Yes. It's a phenomenal matchup, just overall for the passing game. Drake, I'm surprised Hunter Henry's on many waiver wires at this point. I could easily roll. And that's one thing you talked about. What are some of the things you do going into the playoffs? If you've got a guy like Gadsden who's hot and maybe you picked him up, flip him. If you've got a Hunter Henry on your roster, because you can roll with Hunter Henry, he's not going to bring as much. He's not as sexy a name in a trade negotiation, but he may be just as productive, if not more so, than some of these other guys. So I could absolutely roll not only with Hunter Henry this week, but Hunter Henry rest of the season if I needed to.
Yeah, this is the whole pair him with someone else to get an upgrade at another position sort of guy.
No doubt.
Then you have Henry to go in right in there as the slide in there. I like that play a lot. Finish up with Brock Bowers. Will the Raiders malaise drag him down? A horrible matchup this week against the Browns. I don't think you can set a total low enough in this game, by the way. It started off at 37.5, and I think it's gone down to like 35. I personally set it down to 34 when I was guessing the lines. I think it's just a horrible, horrible offensive matchup.
It is terrible. It doesn't always work out that way. So let's hope we get something, out of Shedeur Sanders and company. But, Brock Bowers is going to get targets, right? That he's the one guy. And, even though they don't know how to utilize Ashton Genty, apparently. I mean, 6 carries. Are you kidding me?
Horrible.
How does that happen? In a game you're leading going into the second quarter. So at least for part of the game, you were in front, if not in command. It's just very odd. But how do you get away from playing Brock Bowers? right? I mean,
Yeah.
now, look, maybe, not this week with Gadsden, but maybe you picked up a guy like that. And maybe, if you see a couple of consecutive weeks of Bowers disappointing, you might consider it at some point. I'm not anywhere close to that range. I don't have Bowers in any league where I have to set a lineup, but if I did, I just hope for the best and hope he falls in the end zone at least once. Cleveland is a ridiculously tough defense to play against. Myles Garrett's had 4 sack and 5 sack games this year. Anybody up for 6 against Geno wouldn't surprise me in the least bit. So, but again, there's certain level of player that it takes big stones to get away from putting him in your lineup. And I do think Brock Bowers is in that category. Maybe not as well. Like if you had Trey McBride, it'd be easy. Right?
Yeah. But
nobody's got that decision.
You make a trade, do you buy low? Do you sell low? If you're a playoff team and you have Bowers, and maybe you can get some sort of value for that. I don't know. That's where my wheels are spinning there. I mean,
that's not a bad idea, and if I'm going to buy, it depends on when the trade deadline is, but if it hasn't passed yet, or if it's not this week, then I would wait because his value would probably be a little bit depressed coming out of the Cleveland game. But people are also savvy these days, right? People know. They look and they go, okay, I know Cleveland, very good, held him down. He didn't play Cleveland again. I get it, So it all depends on the knowledge of the manager that you're dealing with. And by the same token, if he has a big game against Cleveland, I don't know if I want to move off of him, right? Because if he can do that against Cleveland, why couldn't he do that against any other defense? He's the focal point of that passing game now.
Indeed. The only focal point, too. I mean, Trey Tucker's just
only
a
one
nice
that should be.
Yep.
Yeah, the rest of those rookies are not even on the radar at the moment.
Agreed. All right, Mike, thank you. This is going to wrap up our show. I really thank you for coming on board. Again, when can people hear you?
Well, if they're listening to Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio, they can hear me Monday through Saturday nights, beginning at 8 o'clock. We simulcast with NFL Radio on Saturday nights. Locally in Jacksonville, I do a show from 10 to noon on 1010XL terrestrial radio. I work all day on the Jags pre, post, and halftime shows on game day. So you'll find me on the air somewhere. It's football season, man. There are no days off.
Exactly right. Mike, it's always a pleasure. Great doing this every year with you. Appreciate it.
Jeff, thanks for having me.
You bet. And we got John McKechnie, Mario Puig tomorrow on the show. So make sure to lock it in for that. Hit that like and subscribe button, people. Thanks everybody for listening. Take care.